Okay, this how-to video is going to show you how to import an IDX file. So Cadence introduced IDX for Allegro only in version 16.5, and what that does is that gives you a bit more control over the mechanical data import. So normally when you import mechanical data, you can either import a DXF or an IDF. Now the IDX is basically a bit more of a structured flow, so I can actually decide what data I want to import from the IDF or the IDX file, and then reject it and inform the mechanical engineer, rather than kind of just shouting over the desk, oh, you know, we need to change this. We can effectively set up some kind of two-way flow here and actually record all the data that we do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with a file import IDX. So I'll start off, I want to bring in the baseline. Now there is a user's baseline option. It's recommended, or you have to do this really for the first off import of an IDX file to create the structure and to make sure that then the ECAD data and the MCAD data remain in sync. So we'll click on users baseline and we'll import. So you can then see I then get the issue or the items that I can import. So I can start off, I can bring in the connector, and you can kind of see I get control over what I'm going to see. I'm then going to bring in the board outline, and then I'm also going to bring in the root outline. That's pretty much default for the first time, so we're just going to say okay, we'll import that. That's then imported that data, and I can start working on my board. So we'll just do that as a save. Let's just call this as a Steve. We'll just overwrite the existing one. So now maybe the mechanical engineers actually come up with a change. So before you would have to import the whole IDF file. Now what we can do now is we can now do a file import IDX. We then browse to effectively the IDX file that he's created. So I've got one called flex updates. Now I don't want to check this as a baseline. If I check this as a baseline, what it's going to do is it's going to effectively resync the baseline. So all the stuff would then go out of sync. So it's important not to do that. We'll then click on import. It then brings in the changes, and you can kind of see everything grays out. So I can look at this, I've got placement of J1. So if I look at the placement of J1, it's physically going to show me the changes. So they've actually gone and placed the connector in the correct location. That's good. So we want to accept that one. Now the next one is they've got a place keep out area here. Now let me just zoom extension. You can kind of see if I kind of toggle this on and off, let's just take off the Roman zoom. So if I toggle this on and off, you can kind of see the placement keep out. I think it's too restricted. There's you know, I'm never going to get all the components in this board if I use that as a placement keep out area. So what we're going to do is we're literally just going to reject that item. We're not going to select it, and then we can put some feedback back saying, you know, it's just too restrictive. You know, so once that's done, we click OK. That then effectively imports the data, so it moves the connector for me. That's what I wanted, but it also starts to create this two-way report file. So if we actually go to the job directory, what you'll find is there's this transaction report. It's an HTML report file that gives us kind of the baseline, what we imported and the changes, and we can kind of start to work our way through this, and it will give us the details of what's happening as we're going along. If we actually find the Steve transactions, this is one that I saved, so the board file, we called it Steve, so we'll look at the transaction report for this. Then it gives us, effectively we imported the default options, that was the starting, and then it's actually saying that we've restricted this because it's too restrictive. Once that's done, we also have the ability to effectively do an export of an IDX file, which would then give us the ability to export this data for the MCAD engineer. The other thing about the IDX is that if we look at properties, obviously this is coming in as a fixed property, so if we actually look at the properties for this, let's do a show element on this, it'll actually tell us that it's an IDX owner. Let's do that, show element. So you can see it's actually fixed by the pro engineer user effectively, so he's the guy that actually controls that. So I would physically have to unfix this component to move it.